Test. 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 Test.
Back, yeah.
Are we ready to start?
Uh-huh.
Good evening, everyone.
Even the wording was,
For the record, we are convening the April 18th, 2024 City Council meeting at 6:30 p.m. Mayor and council members, when I call your name, please say here or present. Mayor Maxton.
here.
Emily Stroop is not present. Keith Roden.
Here.
Ruben J. Olvera.
Here.
Laura Kerner is not present. Scott Parker.
Here.
And Chesley Mencho.
Present.
With 5 members of council present, a quorum is declared.
Thank you, Amanda. Can you hear me okay? Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you all. I'd like to thank everybody for attending the meeting tonight. We have a pretty good turnout for tonight's meeting. We do live broadcast the meeting, and so as part of this, well, I'd like to welcome all those that are joining us by live broadcast. But as part of the meeting, if you do get an opportunity to speak, as part of the meeting, I'd ask that all please use the microphone that's up here at the podium. We get in the habit, a lot of people like to speak from their seats, but if you speak from your seat, the people that are on live broadcast won't be able to hear the comments. And so if you'd stand up and speak from the microphone. When you do get an opportunity to speak, if you'd like to, I'd ask that provide your name and whether or not you're a Fair Oaks Ranch resident. And if you're not a resident, then what county you are from. And tonight, we had 2 individuals sign up for Citizens to be Heard. Mr. Minahan signed up, but I believe you would like to wait and speak as part of the UDC agenda item. Okay. And then Cynthia Sanchez also signed up. Ma'am, would you like to speak?
Would you like for me to repeat for the streaming? Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council members. I am Cynthia Sanchez, and I am a resident of Fair Oaks Ranch, and specifically a member of the Chartwell community. As it pertains to the new community center that's being proposed, I wanted to come forward as sort of a representative for our community and raise some issues that may or may not have been addressed already with regard to some operational issues. And in specific, the parking issues, some safety issues, and potential noise issues. In Chartwell, we have a lot of very young families who have a mix of newborns, toddlers, preschoolers who are in their homes every day, in and about their yards, and also in the streets sometimes, as kids will do. So extra traffic could be a real threat to their safety coming and going. We also have a number of seniors who live in our community, not that I am one of them, but a lot of them have health issues, and they need to be able to access a roadway in order to exit our community very quickly if something should come up. Also, ambulance services that are trying to come into our community need to be able to access quickly. Already, even with normal events that happen, everyday school events, we have folks who are trying to drop off their kids quickly and get to work, parking on the sides of the road in our community, to the point that they have now positioned a Fair Oaks Ranch police officer most mornings there at that particular drop-off point in order to make sure that the kids in our community can safely walk to school. Most of them have parents who walk with them, but at a certain age, those kids also like to be independent and walk to school, and they should be able to when they're in first grade, second grade, ride their bikes. So people are parking on those lanes, squeezing in our already tight roadways that come into our community. There are also those events that happened a lot of the weekends here, and I know that most of you have driven by them coming down Dietz Elkhorn. Those events, flag football, soccer, that are happening on the Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary School park there, their little area where they play, is also squeezing traffic on a regular basis these days. If you look down, people are parked on the sides of the road up and down Dietz Elkhorn. They're parked here in the city parking. They're parked in the Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary School parking, and they're also trying to park on the streets that are our residents there in Chartwell. In addition to those events, there are regular school events that come up. And again, for the Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary second grade concert, or any of those events that they have there, the Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary School Roundup, we encounter those same issues with parking. And as a result of that, those same issues result in a safety issue for us. In addition to that, as the residents, particularly those residents who live on Chartwell Circle, which adjoins this area of the city, it can be a very noisy time. The police office stays open, I understand, 24/7. There's some noise issues that come up with that. There are also issues that come up if they run into the night, with noise issues into the night. So parking is a major issue. Safety is a major issue. Noise can be an issue. So part of my questions really revolve around, operationally, have these issues been addressed? What, in detail, has been put in place to ensure that our residents remain safe, that people will not sort of erode into our neighborhood in order to find parking or turn around. That's another big issue. They just come right in so they can turn around without having to come through the city or back up. So what are we doing to keep our residents and their children safe? Also, with regard to noise, operationally, what has been addressed with regard to event timings and how late will it stay open and how many, what's your max number of folks that can come to these events? So I'd like in great detail some of those questions answered so that we can feel better as a community knowing that our residents there are being taken care of. And while I speak specifically to Fair Oaks Ranch and Chartwell, I think it will also affect the folks across the street, across Dietz Elkhorn, as they are trying to egress and ingress into those areas. The other thing, kind of not at the bottom of the list, but of concern, is the fact that as more of these structures are built adjoining to our neighborhood, creating parking issues, safety issue, noise issues, there is a probability that our property taxes will go down. Our property values, not our taxes. Our taxes will continue to go up, but our values may go down. So again, that's less tax revenue for the city at the end of the day. So in addition to those details, and again, I apologize for not making some of these earlier meetings. I was out of town on family issues. But were there other alternate site options considered? As one of those alternatives to expanding from the old police station out toward Dietz Elkhorn, has anything been looked at interiorly to the space that's here, such as the maintenance yard? Could that be moved elsewhere? And it wouldn't address the parking and it wouldn't address some of the safety, but it would allow a little bit more space maybe for the building to be erected. My understanding is that it's a 5,000 square foot, right now, proposed as a 5,000 square foot building. That's a pretty large building there on the corner. So, Mr. Mayor, council members, I appreciate your time. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And I appreciate you being here tonight and taking the opportunity to provide that information to us. That was all of the individuals that I had on the list that signed up as part of Citizens to be Heard. Is there anybody else here tonight that did not get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Cindy, you're tall. I'm not. Hello, Mayor and City Councilman. I'm Carol Willoughby. I'm the HOA president for Chartwell. It has been brought to our attention, and Cindy did a great job of explaining our concerns. I sure appreciate her doing that. But it has been brought to our attention that the UDC, the Unified Development Code, on page 68, says under the adequate public facilities section 9.3, paragraph A4, that all parking facilities, including driveways, parking lots, parking garages, and all facilities intended for the temporary storage of motorized vehicles, trailers, bicycles, and other transportation devices will be designed in compliance with the requirements contained herein. In the intent of this code, that parking facilities are constructed to provide adequate capacity and functionality to the uses they serve while preserving the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the adjacent areas and the city overall. We in Chartwell feel like you have not looked at the parking situation adequately. We are an adjacent community to the city buildings. We've been good neighbors, we feel like. We want to continue to be good neighbors, but we just ask that you are good neighbors to us. That would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Ben Anadi. I also live in Chartwell here in Fair Oaks Ranch. I just want to put a face to what's being said. It's my children. It's a lot of our children that are walking or playing or living, here in Chartwell that are impacted by what could potentially happen. There's pros and cons to every situation, right? A community center sounds great. I grew up in downtown Chicago. I fought traffic to get to school. Part of why I'm here is to appreciate what this community has to offer. And that's part of what we hope to give our kids. But we're already experiencing these problems. My daughter and soon to be my son walk to that school every single day. And it has become a safety concern just walking to school to drop them off based on the traffic just on this street alone. So, my rationale of being here is I love the idea of community centers. As someone who grew up in Chicago, that sounds incredible to me, a community center. What a great amenity. That being said, I also want to think about the ramifications of those decisions. And as someone that has been involved in code and opening restaurants and doing that things, parking is a major part of that. So if parking, I have fought many parking battles with the city of San Antonio based on my restaurants opening up with the adequate parking. I would hope that same emphasis is being put here because, in downtown San Antonio, we're not impacting houses. Here, we're impacting kids walking to school and communities that many of us moved to be a part of because of that. We all know this is a great place to live. We just want to emphasize to keep it that way for the next generation.
Sure.
That's all I have. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Was there anybody else that would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Bill. I live right across the fence from the city property. So if anybody's impacted as much as anybody, it's me and my family. We had the same issue when they were building this building. I mean, some of the concerns that the residents had were, is the city doing what it needs to do in order to protect all the interests? What we found out with the other situation was the city didn't even order a environmental impact study until we forced them to, pointed out, well, this is an issue with us, and the solution was great. This drainage here is great, and so that was an example where we voiced our concerns. We were able to work together to solve the problems, and I hope that we're able to do that in this case. However, I'm concerned. My question is, why do we even need it to begin with? Is it going to create more problems than it is going to solve problems? If the city's intent is to, okay, let's have a center for people to come. If it's a public building, you're not going to be able to limit it to just Fair Oaks residents. You're going to have to open it up to anybody who wants to lease it for whatever the price is, for whatever the requirements are. That means there's going to be people from all over, without regulation, without control, coming into this community, impacting the kids, the adults, anybody who lives here. So if the city is just intent on putting this in, then I would suggest perhaps considering some ordinances that help to regulate it, such as how late can this thing stay open? I mean, one of the big issues that we had with when they built this building was our privacy. I live right across the fence. The way they had it before, people were going to be able to look right into my backyard and see whatever I'm doing, and that's not acceptable to me because that's a visual encroachment on my privacy. There's other encroachments, however, that need to be considered. I think in this instance, the noise. Is there going to be a decibel limit? Is there going to be an ordinance that the council and the governing body is going to enter into that says, okay, at such and such a decibel limit, you have to stop. I don't want to listen. I mean, I went to college. I listen to loud music, but now there's a time and a place for it. I mean, we're not going to be limited to any. You're not as a public building. You're not going to be able to limit it outside of ordinances to whatever use there is. Okay, you want to have a music concert in, that's fine. There's some types of music that I like. There's types of music that I don't like. That doesn't mean they shouldn't have it. However, there needs to be some regulation on how late they can stay open, the decibel limit, the light pollution. I mean, you're going to put in a bunch of lights out here to account for all the people that are going to come and go, because there's going to have to be safety issues for them too. And if they're happening at night, then they're going to have lighting. And as several have mentioned, particularly Cindy, the parking, good gosh, if you try to leave this neighborhood during school hours, you know as well as I do, it's going to be a nightmare to try to regulate hundreds of people coming in and out in a short window of time. If the idea behind city center is to be, okay, well, we want to be a real city, we need to have a city meeting place. That's fine, I get that. However, and perhaps there's revenue that the city can earn from that. However, at the expense of the city making some money on it, our property values are going to go down. So guess who's going to absorb the windfall that the city, well, you're going to make X thousands of dollars for every event that's there, that's fine. We're going to lose X thousands of dollars in our property values just by putting that there. Not to mention it's going to take a year at least to build that thing, no doubt about it. And I'm interested to know where's everybody going to park? They're going to park in front of my house, right over here. I got the corner lot. I could park 10 cars easy. Can I charge them to do that? No, because it's a city street. They have no reservations on where they park, how they park, what they park there, because it's a city facility. You can't limit a public facility very well, because and regulating is going to be a difficult thing. So I just want to reiterate that source. I live right across the street. We think we have a good relationship with the city, and we appreciate that. We appreciate the police officers, appreciate everything that you the gentlemen and ladies are doing to serve our interest in this community. But like Carol said, it's got to be a balance somehow. And if that's the only place in the entire Fair Oaks Ranch area that we can put that, okay, well, you're going to put it there, and there's nothing that we're going to be able to do about it, except after the fact when all the, you know what, hits the fan. That's going to create other problems that you may not be anticipating, that perhaps stop long enough now to think about it. Can we institute some ordinances to avoid some of these problems that are going to be inherent in putting in a facility like that? Period. There's no way to get around it. The other cost is you're going to have to add more cops to patrol it. Okay, well, if they're here watching these event goers, guess what? They're not cruising around looking for other stuff that they need to be doing. So you're going to hire private security. Those are the questions that I would appreciate. I think people here want the city to at least consider looking long term, because believe it or not, You guys are, in 10 years, you're probably not going to be sitting where you are. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. I can almost promise you, all of you will not be here because you're not going to want to be reelected. You may not be reelected. There's going to be somebody else there. And so if you're making policy decisions for us now, that's fine. That's what your job is to do, and that's what we appreciate you doing. However, think about the next administration that's going to have perhaps different views, different motivations. Protect us now when you have the power to do it, long-term for 20, 30 years from now. If that building's going to be here for 50 years, our protections need to go 50 years and beyond. And that's all I think anybody here is asking that the city do. And we hope that you do that. We think that you will, because you have in the past. It's just we're concerned. We're here to tell you we're concerned. And it's our job to do that, and it's your job to listen to us and that we work together. So thank you.
Hey, sir, and I may have missed it, your last name?
Last name is Blanton.
Lamb. Thank you, sir. And thank you for being here tonight and your comments. And I saw one other person. Yes, sir.
My name's Sam Altamore. I want to concur with virtually everything Bill said. I've had people park in front of my driveway. I've had people park in front of my mailbox. I put notes on their windshields. I take a picture of their license plate. I look up who they are, so I know who they are. And if they do it again, I'm calling a tow truck, or I'm calling a policeman. And I've spoken to the police about it 3 times now. And they said, call them, and they'll citation them, and then they'll have them towed. But that's not the real reason I'm here. I want to talk about the bond issues. And I want to bring it up just very briefly. Why in the world, we have bad streets. I admit that. They need to be kept up much better than they are. The ones that you've got mentioned under this current bond deal, I've driven on all of them. And there's problems. Some of them need repair, some of them need to be replaced. And I agree with that. But I have to tell you, that didn't happen today or yesterday. That's been ongoing. I've lived here since 2009. That's been ongoing since I moved here. I used to live on the backside, now I live down the street from Bill. And it's always been a major problem. They get it fixed eventually, but generally it's late. But why in the world do you pick now to create a $16 million bond issue? And by the way, I'm in the interest rate business. I manage money for a living for the last 55 years. I think I know what I'm talking about. You're going at it when interest rates are the highest they've been in over 25 years. 3.5 years ago, you could have done it for 1.5% to 2%. Now you're going to be looking at 3 to 4%, maybe higher, I'm not sure. I don't follow the municipal bond market. I follow the taxable bond market. But why would you do it when interest rates are at the 25-year height? Why not just maintain them until interest rates get at a reasonable level? Why not take that $2.5 or $3 million surplus you have in the budget and apply it and reduce the amount? Why would you front load it? Do you know where the peak of the interest rate cycle curve is right now? It's at 1 to 2 years. That's the highest rate. That's higher than the 10-year, it's higher than the 30-year. But it's my understanding that this bond issue is going to be front loaded to where more of it comes up in the early years. Now, maybe that's not true, but that's what I read at one point. That's not very wise. But that's my point. Why wait until now to do it? Why didn't you do it 2.5 years ago? Streets were bad then, I promise you. And if you ever drove on any of them, you know that for a fact too. And one last point, back to Bill's thing. I drove the parking lot the other day. I counted 73 parking spots. Now, I'm sure I missed a few. Several of those were handicapped, several of them were for city employee parking only. So let's make it, say, 60. So we have 60 parking places here. And like Bill said, the rest of them are going to be in front of my driveway and my mailbox. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And was there anybody else? I thought there was somebody else that had raised their hand. No? Okay. We'll move on with the presentations tonight. And the first presentation that we have tonight is recognition of Brian with his 5-year service award.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Joanna Merrill, Director of Human Resources and Communications. And so tonight we are recognizing our IT manager, Brian Lejeune, for his 5 years of service with the city. So we'll just take a minute to say a few words about his time here with us. So Brian started with the city back on March 25th of 2019, and he was the City of Fair Oaks Ranch's first ever IT manager. Prior to that, we had a third-party vendor company that we outsourced our IT needs to. And from day one, when Brian arrived, he hit the ground running. During his 5 years here, he has experienced his share of IT challenges along with everything that he's made happen. And just a few short months after Brian began, he started the very arduous process of separating our third-party IT vendor from the city so that we could take on those services in-house. And through this process, Brian really did work tirelessly to meet very, very strict deadlines while still ensuring continuity of services, both internally and externally, because we do have a lot of plants that are also part of our systems and networks. And Brian even survived during those early stages of COVID, working with us too, working with city policymakers and seizing the opportunity to establish very much needed digital governmental tools and strategies to incorporate into our information technology programs and processes. And if changing from a vendor and COVID weren't enough, Brian has also seen the city go through, Microsoft went through a very big security breach a few years back, kind of right around the time of COVID, that affected businesses and governmental entities across the nation. And all of our systems were immediately shut down at the direction of our IT manager, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that all of our systems maintained operations, that nothing had been compromised. And he definitely reminded us what it was like to use some old school equipment at that time. So he really did pull us through so many things over the last 5 years that he's been here. Definitely an invaluable member of our team. And these are just a few of the very big projects that we can think of that Brian has met and faced those challenges head on. And so we are very, very grateful for him for all of the amazing 5 years that he has been with us and managed to keep us up and running and going. So join me in congratulating Brian on his 5 years. And as always, we have the lovely 5-year of service award plaque for Brian. And you're gonna have to bear with me because I'm playing everybody today. And of course, your recognition award. So give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna grab my phone and I'm gonna get a picture of you.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you for what you've done for us during the 5 years you've served here at the city. You definitely made your presence known and made an impact during that time frame, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
We have one other presentation. Before we move on, I want to back up a little bit. We had several individuals that spoke as part of citizens to be heard tonight. And I appreciate everybody that took the opportunity to come to the council meeting. And really, as a council, what we need to hear are your comments. Because the items that some of them that were discussed tonight are not on the agenda tonight, we can't address the items as part of this meeting. But what I can promise you is I wrote down all the notes. I know that your comments will get captured in the minutes of this meeting, and they will get looked at as these issues get dealt with in the future. So please don't think that what you provided was not listened to. It was. I know that all the council members pay particular attention when we have residents that are speaking, and we want to hear your comments because it's very helpful for us and it provides the guidance that we need as far as moving forward. So thank you all again for what you provided tonight, and we will take it seriously, and they will be considered when the agenda items come up. All right? Moving on to our second presentation tonight, it's a recognition of Tree City USA and Arbor Day.
Yes. Good evening, Council. My name is Kelsey. I'm the Environmental Program Manager for the city, as y'all are probably all aware of that by now. And y'all are already probably aware that we are officially a tree city, and so I just wanted to take a moment to formally announce that, as well as discuss what Tree City USA really is and what that recognition means. So this is a program hosted by the Arbor Day Foundation, made to recognize and honor the commitment communities have toward their urban forest. This is no small feat to achieve such recognition. It took countless hours and collaboration between departments and staff, as well as with the support of City Council. Mr. Dan Lamb, which is the chief executive of the Arbor Day Foundation, really summarizes the importance of Tree City USA through a quote that I'd like to read to you all today. And so he says, Tree City USA communities see the positive effects of an urban forest firsthand. Trees being planted and cared for by these communities are ensuring that generations to come will enjoy a better quality of life. Additionally, participation in this program brings residents together and creates a sense of civic pride, whether it's through volunteer engagement or public education. If there was ever a time for trees, now is that time. Communities worldwide are facing issues with air quality, water resources, personal health and well-being, energy use, and extreme heat and flooding. Fair Oaks Ranch is doing their part to address these challenges for the residents now and into the future. And so with this honor, we wanted to celebrate our first year as a tree city, and so we are hosting our first annual Arbor Day celebration. And so on April 26th, which is next Friday at 10 a.m., we will be hosting a small ceremony here at City Hall, located at the revitalized Butterfly Garden. This celebration is open to the public, and so we invite everyone to come out and join us for these festivities. We're starting a new tradition where we will be planting and dedicating a tree. Councilmember Stroop, as well as Mayor Maxon, will be saying a few words. And so we invite everyone to come and celebrate with us. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Mayor Maxon to read our Arbor Day proclamation.
You know, Kelsey's done a lot of work during the short time frame that she's been here as part of our city staff and showing off the plaque. But, you know, the oak trees are a special part of our city. And protecting our environment and protecting our trees are of a high priority, Kelsey. And she's really extended the efforts needed to ensure that we protect what is special to our city. Fair Oaks, oaks being in our name, really signifies the importance of what our oak trees mean to us. And it's a pleasure to have you as part of our city. You have, I don't know, she's redone the Butterfly Garden, and what she just spoke of on Arbor Day, we're going to plant a new tree in the middle of the Butterfly Garden. And so as part of that, we have a proclamation for Arbor Day that I'll pass off to her. And the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas our city originated from the development of the Fair Family Ranch, and the city was appropriately named out of the appreciation of its historic oak trees. And whereas trees within our community help preserve the natural beauty that makes Fair Oaks Ranch an attractive and favorable place to live. And whereas the preservation of trees is a consideration in all aspects of our continued growth as a city. Now and therefore, I, Gregory C. Maxton, Mayor of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day in our city, and I encourage all citizens to care for their trees, recognizing the value that they add to the City of Fair Oaks Ranch. And furthermore, the City of Fair Oaks Ranch is committed to be maintaining our oak trees, which helps make our community a special place and in becoming Tree City, USA. So thank you very much, Kelsey.
Thank you. You want a picture?
Here you go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to our consent agenda for tonight. We have two items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of the April 4th, 2024 regular City Council meeting minutes. The second item is approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of a purchase order with Chastain Ford for one Ford F-250, expenditure of the required funds, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. Is there any council member that would like to remove any of the items from consent to consideration? If not, then could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
From Laura, and a second?
Second.
I think Chesley got you. With the motion on the table to approve the consent agenda, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. And next, we'll move on to our consideration items. The first item that we have on the agenda tonight is the consideration and the possible action to cancel the July 4th, 2024 City Council meeting. And this year, July 4th is on Thursday night, the night that our council meeting is scheduled for. From what we've looked out over the agenda items and meeting with the city manager, I don't see any impact to our routine council items that would need to be addressed. And I believe Scott has already worked through the calendar for our budget, which is probably one of the primary items that we have during the middle of the summer. And he's been able to produce the calendar with this meeting being vacant during that time frame. And plus, beyond that, we'll all be at the club for the 4th of July event that night. Tell you what, I'll make a motion to approve canceling the July 4th, 2024 City Council meeting.
I second.
And a second from Laura. And do we have any comments or questions from anybody here tonight? Any further discussion from council? With the motion on the table to cancel the July 4th meeting, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you all. The second item that we have on the consideration agenda tonight is the consideration and the possible action approving a resolution authorizing the city manager to proceed with the city council's selection of a community center design. And with this, so we're going to talk about the design tonight. And I know there was a lot of aspects that we talked about that came up as part of citizens to be heard. And because our agenda item tonight is really focused on the design selection, it prevents us from going beyond that to discuss some of the items that y'all brought up. But again, I just want to reinforce, I've written them all down, and they will get addressed at a future time, so thank y'all. I'll turn it over to Grant.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Grant Watanabe, the Director of Public Works for the city, and I'm here to present a resolution regarding the selection of a community center exterior option. There we go. So if you recall, back at the end of February, our communications department conducted a survey just to get input from residents on what design they preferred the most. This survey started at the town hall. The community center was one of 2 topics at that town hall and was open for about 2 weeks. And we got a total of 242 responses. Of that, 51% of the respondents preferred the gable roof option, 18% preferred the hip roof option, and 29% preferred the monitor roof option. And you can see a little graphic of what each looks like toward the bottom. Next slide. All right, so of the 51% that preferred the gable roof option, and they gave it a score of 4 out of 5, which means they kind of really liked it. But in addition to that, they also provided some comments that included that it aligns with the community's aesthetics. It's really just across the street from City Hall, and then it matches fairly well with City Hall, actually. Some other comments included that it's perceived as the most cost-effective and that it has a clean, simple, elegant architectural style. Looking at the way forward, once council selects an exterior design option, staff intends to direct our architect to finalize the schematic design and start their detailed design development. Further down the road, future updates to council are planned to include a look at the 90% design plans, a discussion on the cost estimate, and some potential funding options. All of that would be leading toward a bid advertisement, which I expect to occur sometime in the fall. Again, as part of the agenda packet, there is a draft resolution. We've pre-populated it with the gable option, but of course, if the council prefers a different option, that can be changed. And with that, Mayor, does the council have any questions?
Good. Any questions from anybody here tonight reference the design option for the community center? And sorry, yes, would you mind coming to the podium?
Again, my name is Ben Anadi. I live here in Chartwell. So again, with gable roof design, which I agree, fits the aesthetic. Do we know directionality, which way that gable balcony would face? So that open design at the end, do we know which direction that's proposed to face? It would face towards Chartwell. So again, from a sound pollution perspective, having built a number of restaurants with that gable, the sound pours out that way, right? So those are the open points. Again, I'll strictly say from a design perspective, I appreciate the gable, but perhaps pointing the exterior opening in a different direction would make sense from a community perspective. And again, working together to achieve both goals here. That opening point, that gate, that patio, at least in the restaurant world, that's where our sound pollution goes. So it's something to consider. Texas, we want outdoor events. If we could point that patio in a different direction, may work to achieve both things. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Are there any other questions or comments? Then with that, could I get a motion to approve a resolution?
Mayor, do you have a question?
Hi, I'm Brenda Minahan, and my question is can you please provide some of the things that the community center is going to be used for? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, it's a little bit beyond what's on the agenda tonight. Can I provide a brief?
Statement of fact you could give.
I would also say, I mean, the materials from the town hall that the city had are probably readily available for anyone here, I would assume, so.
Okay, and I can get those for you. But related to that, just a brief statement. It is a center that was looked at for the use by the residents of Fair Oaks Ranch. And we have a list, and I'll get the list for you. You may be able to get it tonight before you go home if we can pull it up that quick. But good question, thank you. Anybody else that I missed? Then could I get a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to proceed with the city council selection of the community center design known as the gable roof option?
So moved.
From Keith in a second.
Second.
Scott, any other discussion from council? Motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you, Grant. And then we have 3 workshops on the agenda tonight. And the first workshop is a discussion on the 2024-25 budget calendar. Summer.
Yes, thank you. I'm Summer Fleming, the Director of Finance. I have no formal presentation tonight, but I'll go over the proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget calendar on page 31 in the agenda packet. Staff is already well into the budget process internally. Department heads will be submitting their departmental operating budget requests to finance on April 22nd. They've had about a month to complete those. Once submitted, the finance department and city manager will begin reviewing requests with each department. And then we have council workshops for the department budgets starting in June. We'll run a concurrent process with council starting in May to review the 5-year financial plan inclusive of the utility and the strategic action plan. I'm going to continue through the calendar, and then we'll come back to discuss and receive council guidance on the timing of these 2 items. We've done our best to manage the workload of each workshop by splitting up meetings based on the size of department budgets to allow larger budgets more time. And we've lost the meeting in July with the cancellation of the 4th, but I think we can still get through everything in the same manner and detail as last year's budget process, which I believe was well received by council and staff. In that first meeting in August, we'll follow up on departmental budget questions, review the CIP, and submit the calculated tax rates to council, assuming we receive certified values timely on July 25th. With the increase in appraisal value protests the last couple years, we have had to push the calculated rate submittal to the next meeting, and we can do that this year if we need to. The final proposed budget and maximum proposed tax rate will be at the end of August. And then similar to last year, we'll need 1 special meeting to hold the public hearing and introduce the budget and tax rate ordinances. And final adoption is scheduled for the September 19 regularly scheduled meeting. We do have the bond election coming up on May 4th, and pending the outcome of that, I've tentatively added in timing of a general obligation bond sale. The offering and 1-week advertisement would be somewhere between July 25th and August 8th, and best case scenario would be to award the sale to the lowest bidder at the August 15th meeting. If the election passes, we would begin preparing for a debt issuance and incorporate the CIP into the budget. So that's the full calendar, and no formal action is required tonight, but I would like guidance on the planning process. Going back to the beginning, we have the May meetings to discuss council priorities prior to the department budget meetings. The first is reviewing the 5-year financial plan, including assumptions for revenue and expenditures, which on this calendar is scheduled for the May 2nd meeting. However, it may be beneficial to push that item to the May 16 council meeting in order to include the outcome of the election into the 5-year plan. If we were to push that to May 16, we would need to determine when council would like to hold an SAP workshop. You may recall last year, we held a special meeting on June 23rd specifically for the Strategic Action Plan workshop, and that allowed council extensive time to review each item and make changes to the plan. So this year, we would need guidance on if you wanted to do the SAP workshop during a regular meeting or consider scheduling a special meeting similar to last year for the SAP workshop. Yes.
On the meeting on September 10th, it just shows special meeting. Are we going to do that at the normal time? I'm just going to put it in the calendar. 6:30?
That is the plan, yes. That is a
Okay.
Tuesday, but
Yeah, I just
feel
want to
it's
get it in the
safe.
calendar.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I think one of the comments that Summer made in her presentation is that all of council was happy or content with the process of the way we did things last year. That is the feedback that I've had from council. And so in first starting off with this, is there, from what we did last year, is there anything that we need to add in addition to the process or anything that we need to remove from the process? Yes, ma'am.
I do think it's important that we spend some time on the SAP. We have, I don't want to say avoided it, but we have avoided it for multiple years, either through scheduling conflicts or whatever, but every agenda item that comes before us is supposed to be tied to the strategic action plan. And if we don't review that from time to time, I want to make sure that we're working on the right things. There's several things in there we've already completed. We haven't added new things in a while. And I think, at least for the direction of staff and our future council meetings, we really need to update that.
Okay.
And I think almost the entire council has turned over since we wrote that, except for you and I, Mayor. So I think it's about time.
Okay.
So I would ask the council members if you can please find time more than just a normal city council meeting. I think it is worth our time to significantly review it.
So Summer, with that, so if you're proposing moving the preliminary tax rolls, was that it to the May 16th meeting?
Yes, that item would go to the May 16th for the 5-year plan. And then sounds like possibly doing an SAP workshop at a special meeting.
And then when would we need to complete that by? Would that be prior to the June 6th meeting?
No, we wouldn't need to. Last year, it was June 23rd, and so we had already presented some department budgets at that time.
So if we could find a date between the end of May and 1st of June, maybe last week of May, first week of June.
It's Memorial Day.
Well, it's
Is there
the weekend,
anything
but-
that prevents us from doing it starting earlier in May? I mean, do we need the 5-year plan in order to do that? Like, could we talk about SAP like in the second week of May or something like that?
Preparation time. to be
Okay,
honest,
it's
would
more
be
for
the-
staff prep time, okay.
Tell you what, we can, if we're looking at the last couple weeks in May, first couple weeks in June, ask the city secretary if she could reach out to council members and find the best date in there, and then we could get that added as a special meeting to do the SAP.
Certainly work with that, yes.
Okay. Any other comments on the calendar?
Just know that's end of school. I have a graduate happening, so she graduates on June 1st. So
Okay.
that's going to be a really busy time for me, so.
So
just
after June
FYI.
1st? So then you're free? Okay.
Sure.
Well, and that's why Christine will reach out to all of us, and we'll find the best time that works for all of us. I believe this is important enough that we need to have as all of council. We'll find the best date.
We can certainly use that as a goal. I mean, if the logistics of that are just impossible to navigate, like Summer said, anytime before the end of July really is okay, before we do our final prep. June is preferable, but if we need to push it a couple weeks, that's doable.
All right.
But we can start there.
Thanks, Scott. Any other concerns on the calendar? Yeah, I thought the process last year went very smooth, walked us through a step-by-step, and if we're using that as the guide for this year, then I think we're on track.
Okay, Great, thank you.
Thanks, Summer. The next workshop that we have on the agenda tonight is the Mixed-Use Village Zoning District residential component. And Eric Bilstein from our P&Z is going to present this.
Mayor, I'll kick it off if you don't mind with a little
I'd appreciate
background on this item. Going back, council will likely recall that at the last council meeting in December, I believe it was the 17th, the council held a workshop on the residential component of the mixed-use village zoning district that was led by the mayor. The crux of that discussion was how and whether to limit multifamily development in mixed-use villages. That was the primary question on the table. Following that meeting, staff worked with legal and took some options back to the Planning and Zoning Commission at its meeting on March 14th, so about a month ago, with respect to permitting residential uses in these zones, or what to permit in mixed-use village zones. One option presented to the Planning Commission was to permit single-family residences by right, meaning that single-family would not be restricted in mixed-use villages, while multifamily residences would be limited to 30% of total buildable area. The other option was to simply limit all residential uses to 30%. Either of those options would encompass some limitation on multifamily development as a percentage of the total buildable area in a mixed-use village. The Planning and Zoning recommendation was that they opted for the latter option at its March meeting to limit all residential uses to 30% of total area, and that would be based on square footage. That's the recommendation before you tonight. And yeah, Planning and Zoning Commissioner Eric Beilstein is here to present the commissioner's recommendation to you.
Just have one quick question. Scott, when you were presenting the options, we could limit all residential components to 30%, which I believe is what's being recommended. But the other, could we limit just the multifamily portion of it? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. As just mentioned, my name is Eric Beilstein. I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We also have our chair and vice chair in the audience. I want to start out with a very brief overview of the revision process, the Unified Development Code that was adopted in 2019. At your direction, the P&Z started to evaluate proposed changes in two phases. Phase one was the revisions required by changes in Texas law, which now you've already approved. And phase two is not to change the concepts of what were already approved, but rather correct any errors, create consistency, and close any unexpected loopholes. First off, I want to clear up a little misunderstanding from the last council presentation. We have at this point not brought things to you in phase two that were the highest priority. That was kind of mentioned last time. The spacing of plants isn't the highest priority. We wanted to bring to you the low-hanging fruit while we were working on the most important thing, which we think is honestly what we have before you tonight, which is the mixed-use village. Now to go to the glasses. The city's comprehensive plan defines mixed-use village zoning as an area within the city that encourages a mixture of uses that establish pedestrian-scale development at major transportation nodes, including retail, restaurant, offices, civic uses, and housing options. It also enables commercial developments to incorporate a mix of housing types, including a focus on aging adult communities, allowing older residents the option to downsize their homes. Mixed-use developments have gained popularity in recent years as they create vibrant and dynamic spaces that meet the needs of diverse communities. The city of Fair Oaks Ranch is unique as it does not have a commercial downtown. It only has limited zones for commercial use. Establishing a maximum residential component in the mixed-use village zone helps protect those undeveloped commercial developments from effectively being transitioned to a majority or completely residential based. While the mixed-use village district was envisioned to encourage mixed uses, the Unified Development Code, UDC, currently does not require a mix of uses within the zoning district. This potential loophole became evident when a developer proposed a multi-unit development that did not include a mixture of uses. Although the development did not advance, it raised awareness of the need for UDC policy amendment. Attached in your packet is Exhibit A, which is the proposed revision of Section 4.9, Table 4.2, Permitted Use Table. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the policy at its March 14th meeting. There are currently 4 types of residential uses permitted within the mixed-use village zoning district: single-family residential, accessory building residential unit, garage apartment, single-family residential attached, townhomes, patio home, duplex, multi-unit homes, 3 to 4 units, and multifamily residential. The Commission's proposed revision inserts an asterisk into each of the 4 residential uses above. This change places a maximum of 30% of the total area for residential uses based on square foot. And I'll read that asterisk. Permitted as part of the mixed-use development that contains both residential and non-residential components within a single unified development. The residential component shall not exceed 30% of the total area, square foot, of the land use in the entire single unified development or lot as applicable. A single unified development shall be considered as the area lots shown on an approved concept plan. If no concept plan exists, then this maximum residential component percentage shall be calculated per lot. The total area of the land uses in a development calculation shall include the gross area inside of all buildings, on all floors, and any outdoor areas associated with land uses, i.e. outdoor dining areas. The Commission's recommendation does not allow for a completely residential development, but rather provides for commercial development with or without some residential component. This provides amenities and benefits that potentially outweigh losing a commercial zone to a residential area greater than 30%. They further noted that developers can request rezoning when they desire a deviation from the UDC zone restrictions. For example, a developer could request a rezone from mixed-use village to neighborhood residential or rural residential if it was believed to be in the best interests of the development in the community. Policy analysis benefits to citizens. Supports priority 2.1 to manage the physical development of the city in accordance with the comprehensive plan. Establishes limitations on certain residential types within the mixed-use village zoning district to ensure a mix of uses when certain residential types are part of a development. Retaining primarily commercial areas is a benefit to the citizens by increasing the tax base and provides a combination of amenities and services to our city rather than having to travel to other cities for those services. Having a residential component can enhance the development by accommodating aging and other opportunities to stay in the city. And limiting the amount of residential component allows for more citizens to have a place to gather, connect, creating a sense of community. In summary, one of the most important and long-lasting decisions the council can make is about land use. Decisions that will last longer than your time on the council and will affect the community for decades to come. In a nutshell, for your consideration tonight, deliberation is twofold. I think almost everyone is in agreement that turning over our mixed-use areas to high-density housing would be a mistake, and the commission is suggesting setting a limit of a maximum of 30% of the total area of land use. Do you feel that that is the right line in the sand, number-wise? Secondly, in a previous council discussion, it was suggested that although high-density housing was a concern, it's required by law to have an area in the city to have that. Perhaps the city should not be concerned if it was, for instance, a 20-acre mixed-use parcel become 4 or 5-acre single-family properties. Should single-family properties be limited in this zone as to not overrun the potential for commercial uses? It is the opinion of the commission that they should also be limited as well, for the reasons stated above. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, unless it pertains to plant spacing.
Tell you what,
I won't talk about
Oh,
plant
good,
spacing.
oh, good.
No shrubbery tonight.
We'll have what I'd like to do is get through this. So if you have questions on the information you presented, we can go through those. What I'd like to do is then come back to
Yeah, can we ask questions first?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
what I just said is that if you had questions on the information that he presented, we'll address those now. I'd like to get through that, then we'll go to Mr. Minahan, and the information you're presenting is related to this same topic. And after that, then we'll come back and have a discussion on the way forward with the information that's been presented. All right? Any questions for Eric? Yes, ma'am.
So what due diligence, as I'm going to call it, did the P&Z do to arrive at the 30%? How did y'all come up with 30%?
That's difficult. I mean, one of the things that we've done in other areas is to look at what does Bernie do? What does Fredericksburg do? And when I said that the city is unique, it's unique in that there are not cities that have, again, a downtown district. The city of Bernie, for instance, has 5 different commercial zones and overlay zones on top of them, so they do not have a mixed-use zone. So we looked at other cities, staff looked at it, the consultant looked at it, and felt that that was a fair, reasonable spot. Again, that line in the sand can move one way or another, but felt that it's primarily a commercial zone. The opportunity, if there's a project which can make it a little bit heavier in the residential component, there's a method to go to council. It just by right felt that that was just a fair line in the zone.
So did you speak with developers or anybody that would be interested in doing this to see if that's a reasonable number?
Not at this point. This is, again, a workshop to get kind of feedback from you, and this is a long process that will involve, it doesn't automatically change that zone. It is a long process, and that could
I
move
understand the
one way.
process. I'm just trying to understand how you arrived at 30%. So it sounds like you just threw a number out.
So to be fair to the commission, that number came from our principal planners, who've done this for quite some time in a variety of cities. And I think that the idea behind the 30% is that the predominant use of the property, the message we heard from the council was for it to be commercial, and that was the message that's been consistent. That when the last development came in, there was a lack of commercial on there, and it's supposed to be mixed use, and there was nothing in the UDC that would limit it from not being all residential, right? And so the other part of this that was intended to limit, I guess, the attractiveness of mixed use for perhaps multifamily is the fact that that 30% is including each floor. Like it's all of it's the square footage devoted to the particular use, whether it's multi-floors or what have you. Again, that can be changed, or within that 30%, you could limit the percent of that 30% that could be used for multifamily if you wanted to. So I mean, there's additional options that are available.
I want to ask about your tie back to the comprehensive plan. And so you said this supports our comprehensive plan, and I've heard other people state what they say is the council's opinion of mixed use. So you said on here, how does retaining the primary commercial area tie back to the comprehensive plan?
If you look at the comprehensive plan, and I just put a little note on here, when asked to identify the most important thing Fair Oaks Ranch can do in the next few years, the overwhelming majority of the respondents, 55%, said managing growth to preserve the rural character of the community. The sentiment appears in several questions, responses, particularly in regards to housing and commercial development.
Yep.
Respondents said that they are seeing too many homes and apartments being built, and while it goes through, but bottom line, they said that the over 50% had wanted an increase in small shops, not big box, some food items.
Which page are you at? Because I actually was there. And I don't remember
It's in a
that.
chart, a pie chart, and I don't have the page in front of me. I just cut and paste,
So-
but it is, it's 50.3%. The respondents said that is, that one of the highest priorities is the restaurant and shop use, to grow that, and over increase in residential. There's plenty, and that, I guess, is a point of, there's lots of places in Fair Oaks Ranch for new residents. There's very few places that are zoned mixed use, and very few places that are commercial.
I know, because I was part of the team that set up that map. So I'm trying to relate to you, and Greg and I are probably the only ones, and I think Gary left already, when we created this map and the reason why we did it. And I was here when we created the comprehensive plan. I was here when we did these town halls. I was there and I heard their feedback. I just want to make sure we're not misinterpreting what their feedback was by just reading a couple of words and assuming what it means.
Is that next tab the map?
I don't think so.
This
Oh,
is
there
the
you
map. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Is that the zoning?
Yes. So I will give my recollection. You could disagree with me, Greg, you were there as well, of how we created this map, whether it's 100% reflected as exactly what I'm saying in the comprehensive plan, that might be a separate issue. But predominantly, we wanted to keep ourselves a bedroom community. We knew we needed to have some commercial. We know we needed to have some spaces to allow for apartments and multifamily. So we found the places in the city that, if we had it, would be the most appropriate place. You'll see it's at the corner of Dietz and Ralph Fair Road, and down there by Old Fredericksburg Road and I-10. But in nowhere in those discussions was it with the intention of, we want commercial there. It was, if we had to have it, this is where we would want it. So it wasn't that we intentionally prevented residential people from going there. We just said, if we had it, this is where it would be. We could have just made those 100% commercial districts. We did not. We picked mixed use to minimize the amount of commercial to allow some residential in there. And we also didn't limit the number of residential because we could be okay if residents move in there. Now, that was based off of the feedback at that time during that survey, which was done, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now, maybe.
Probably close to it.
8, 9 years ago. I'm not comfortable changing that until I hear from the residents. If the residents tell me, I want commercial here, I am comfortable limiting residential and making it commercial. Might as well just make it commercial if that's what the residents want. But I have not heard that. I do think if we have commercial, it'll be there. So that's why I'm asking the question is, where in here did you read that? Because I want to make sure it was stated right, because I don't remember that when I was at these surveys in this comprehensive plan. I don't want to make us go against what our comprehensive plan is, which is what the goal of the P&Z is.
Yeah, and I wasn't familiar, being new of the comprehensive plan, so I read the whole thing, and towards the end, there are 2 pie charts.
Okay, let me look.
And it has 50.3% is asking for, again, that kind of small, and you know, it is commercial now, right? It's commercial that can allow both ways.
It's
not like
mixed
you're
use.
creating.
We
Correct.
could have created a commercial district, but we
Right.
didn't create a commercial district. We created a mixed use because we had to have commercial somewhere, and we didn't want it all commercial. That's, I mean, we could have. We did not. We chose not to. We could
Well, then
change
I
it.
was looking it up, and
Yeah.
I think the commissioner is referring to page 17 of the comprehensive plan.
All righty, I'll go there. Thank you.
Thank you, I didn't print it out of.
And
There are a couple of, technically, I guess, donut charts on that page, and it says.
I see.
And while 50.4% indicated wanting more shops and restaurants, support for small business far outweighed interest in, quote, big box retail stores.
Right.
So the idea is that, you know, having a place, and although it's not mixed use, where Parker's and the coffee shop, that's an amenity of the community that is beneficial. that you can, on your way to work, stop and get.
Oh, I
you know, that
understand.
kind of
I understand the
thing. So-
benefit. I just want to make sure I'm following the direction of the residents that I heard when we helped create this comprehensive plan. Though I 100% agree, want to limit the number of multifamily use homes and multifamily. I 100% agree that is in line with what I understand our comprehensive plan to be. I don't want us to go off of what we think the residents mean without asking the residents. That's why we review the comprehensive plan, which we are overdue on doing as well. And typically, we do a town hall, and we get surveys, and we adjust as appropriate. So that's why I was just asking, and thank you, I appreciate for pointing this out, because I wasn't sure what page you were on.
What I read out of it is that there is
Okay.
back then, a desire to have some small mom and pop, some small shops, things like that. And if it can be creatively with residential, I think that's the best use.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
Anybody else?
I think.
I tell you what, can we move on to Mr. Minahan so we can hear his comments? And we'll come back to you, David, if we haven't covered it.
Might as well be up here to get hung, right? Kind of the elephant in the room. My name is Mark Minahan. I live at 31280. Let my voice get straightened out here. 31280 FM 3351. I am Mr. Mixed Use. I'm the one that they've been talking about for 6 years. So, let me first say good evening, council, mayor, councilman, staff. My voice is cracking. It's waited too long, and all you citizens that came out. I'm going to get to the UDC, but I believe I need to give a little background, and that's what I would like to do. So really, I want to address the policy, but I want to talk about something, a procedure, and I believe some of you may have received a copy of it last fall, but it's a procedure that state government has put in place to help municipalities form a better and more transparent local government and, frankly, keep them out of the courthouse. I'm referring to takings impact assessments, or TIAs, are they known? And it's located in Title 10 of the Government Code. But first, a quick brief history of, need some water. In 2017, we had several properties annexed in the city of Fair Oaks Ranch. Tonight, I'm here to speak only about one of my properties, which is not this one that everybody's griping about. I'm talking about the one down the road, what we call our home track. Thank you, ma'am. In 2018, the city followed up with zoning, at which time I asked for permanent zoning of mixed use, was denied and told no. I was told, quote, "We don't trust you, we don't know what you would build, and we need to see plans." Following that meeting, P&Z Council came up with the 2,000-foot or the 200-foot strip map you currently see. I think it's that map. Is that upper one with the strip on it? Is that the one?
Sir, this is the future land use map that's up that shows future.
Can you click the zoning map? Up north more? Yeah.
Yeah, you notice that mixed use right there? You notice these other purple tracks? I won the lotto. I'm the only one that got that strip. You might ask yourself why no other mixed-use tract got that and what that implies from a fairness standpoint. I didn't get angry, and I'm not now. Because this tract has been vested since 2008, and it is grandfathered until 2038, okay? A long time from now. Like they said earlier, none of y'all will be here. I hope I'm here, and I hope all of y'all are here. But that's the reality of it. I'm the guy that has the goats. I've got cows on several tracks. I love this place. I've been here since I think 2000 or 2002. We used to have a house back in the Deer Meadows, and all our kids were gone. We moved over to a place. That track over there was part of the original Sauer property that the, can't think of the name of it, Setterfield is built on. And when the Oompah passed away, there's a little, business. So anyway, Cheryl Blackman, she was her and her husband decided to sell the place, and I bought it. Anyway, a couple of years ago, when our kids all gone, we went and we moved over to that track. So that's where we live at now. Anyway, after that, additionally, after going back to that, what I was talking about. Additionally, after that meeting, I was approached by the then mayor, Mr. Manitzis, and I was told, don't worry, we will put you on the future land use map, the flume, as all mixed use as you see it today. That's what we were just talking about. And with all due respect to the current council, we all know how y'all feel about the flume map. You stated it so eloquently last fall. Remember, we don't have to vote for it. Talking about when I come in there with hat in hand asking, hey, I'm supposed to be able to get this put to mixed use. Oh, no. That's what I was told, but that's what it said last fall. Next, the original UDC, which was down zoning for all. Everybody that was annexed, we were all down zoned, but primarily me. I've got the mixed use, so down zoning. This gets us the 22, 23 timeframe, and the rewriting what we're doing now of the UDC. Last year, while going through section 4.4 rezoning, section 2, newly annexed territory, the city attorney added, unless permanent zoning is requested, that's a quote, unless permanent zoning is requested with the annexation, where we heard that before, his side comment, CT 17 states, quote, it is legal to assign a temporary zoning, but issues arise when the request for permanent zoning is not followed through. Recommend revising section for requirement to zone concurrent with annexation. Good advice. Finally, that gets me kind of where I want to really talk about. We're up here to this government code, Title 10, Chapter 2007, and it's entitled Governmental Action Affecting Private Property Rights. We all know about the power of eminent domain, right? And a physical taking. We just did one out here on Ralph Fair Road, I guess in conjunction with this bridge, okay? But that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on regulatory takings, or as they call it, inverse condemnation takings, okay? Obscure, right? It's not somebody kicking in your door and say, hey, we want your goats, The Attorney General of Texas has put together the Texas Real Property Rights Preservation Act guidelines to help municipalities through the treacherous waters. Okay, if you will allow me, I want to read just a couple of things out of this, and I'll be brief, and then I'll give you all this if you want it. I think some of y'all already have it. First thing I want to read is the purpose. The Private Property Rights Preservation Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 2007, the Property Rights Act, represents a basic charter for the protection of private real property rights in Texas. The Property Rights Act is the legislature's acknowledgement of the importance of protecting private real property interests in Texas. The purpose of the act is to ensure that certain governmental entities make careful evaluation of their actions regarding private real property rights, and that those entities act according to the letter and the spirit of property rights. In short, the Property Rights Act is another instrument to ensure open and responsible government. Then section 1.3, titled Takings Impact Assessment Requirement. Some government actions taken pursuant to these property rights Act guidelines require the government entity to promulgate takings impact assessments. They call them TIAs. TIAs ensure that information regarding the private real property implications of government actions is considered before decisions are made and actions taken. This information and analysis must be accurate, concise, and legally sound. TIAs must concentrate on the truly significant real property issues, not merely amass needless detail and meaningless data. Nevertheless, the public is entitled to more than a mere pro forma analysis of the government entities covered by the Property Rights Act. TIAs serve as a means of assessing the impact on private real property rather than justifying decisions already made. The failure of a governmental entity to promulgate a TIA when one is required may subject that entity to a lawsuit to invalidate the government action. The TIA is a critical mechanism in ensuring that requisite attention is paid to the impact of the covered governmental action on real property interest. And now I'm going to define, I think most people in here, or some people in here know what it is, but just so everyone knows what we're talking about, what a taking is, okay? What a taking is. And it's defined in section 2007.002, defines a taking as a governmental action that affects private real property in whole or in part, or temporarily or permanently, in a manner that requires the governmental entity to compensate the private real property owner as provided by the 5th, the 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution, and the 17th and the 19th, Article 1 of the Texas State Constitution. B, a government action that, 1, affects an owner's private real property that is subject to the governmental action in whole or in part on a temporary or permanent manner that restricts or limits the owner's right on that property that would otherwise exist in the absence of the government action. And 2, lastly here, is the producing cause of a reduction of at least 25% in the market value of the affected property, private real property, determined by comparing the market value of the property as the governmental action is not in effect and the market value of the property determined as if the government action is in effect. And lastly, what state laws, and this, I'm not reading it out of there, it's just comments here, but it's section 1.33, state law, what it has to say about it. Under the laws of the Texas courts have set up several general tests for takings, but I want to focus on, there's 6 of them, I want to focus on number 5. And I have my reasons for that, but I'm going to focus on number 5, which is relevant to tonight's discussion. And it reads, whether the governmental action accords with substantive due process principles through a rational relationship to a legitimate government interest. It's a mouthful. So restated from section 1.3, for a regulation that fails to serve any legitimate governmental objective may be so arbitrary or irrational that it runs afoul of the due process clause. So where did we get this idea of 70% commercial and 30% residential? I'll tell you where it came from. It came from the P&Z meeting on November 9th, 2023. And I will quote the chairperson. I did some research, coming up with a justification of the 30%. I looked at a couple developments in the city of San Antonio, and it turns out that their commercial space is 30% of the entire acreage, so the 30% should be of it, it's a quote, should be of the entire acreage of the entire development, and they used a 30%, or to me, they came up with 28%, close enough to say 30 on rounded of the total acreage. Now, that's the reverse situation. After some long thoughts and discussion, I had to remember that there are only 3 lots we are really talking about here in the city of Fair Oaks Ranch, and if you actually look at all the residential that we have, it makes sense in my mind to have 70% or greater commercial, because we have a significant amount of residential in the city and we want to ensure that we have a commercial component to the city. There are many reasons for commercial components. One is sales tax revenue, which would help the property taxes on the individual family, and property here is so other than that was the only way I could come up with the 30%. Are you kidding me? I mean, has anybody, I mean, are you kidding me?
So, Mr.
A
Minahan,
feasibility study? How about talking to the guy that owns the property? I don't think in 20 years I've talked to anybody over here a couple of times other than Carol Van Zant from the city. You know, in this thing, she said, the chairperson said that after many thoughts and long discussion, who'd you discuss it with? It wasn't discussed that night. And it's sure no one picked up the phone and called me. I would love to hear from you guys. You know, I sit here and I listen to you guys talk about community centers. How do you know I wouldn't give you 5 acres for a community center? How come? Because you never call me. I appreciate y'all's time.
hey, Mr. Minahan, before you leave, so what you've presented as a problem, I don't know that I fully understand.
Everything I said is documented, recorded, either videotaped or audio taped. It's easy to produce, and everybody ought to think about that.
What's the challenge that is presented to you in your property?
What's the challenge?
Yes, the
Well,
issue.
you don't set arbitrary numbers. You let markets. That's what we live. We live here in a republic, right? We're supposed to be free, right? I don't want y'all telling me how many goats I can put on my property any more than you know what kind of gas I should put in my car. You know, I want the same things everybody else wants here. I want things nice. You know, no one ever asked me how many engineering studies I did on both properties, how many, what do you call the things that you draw up the drawings? What do you call those? The charapes, or what do you call them? Charrettes. How many charrettes I paid for? No one ever asked me that. I'm done.
David, did you have a question? I don't know that we need a whole much more comment, but if you had a question that we needed to address.
In the beginning, we had the mixed use was going to be a commercial area. We added the residential because the state told us we had to have places for multifamily residences. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, sir. Go ahead. If you'd step up to the mic.
Good evening, guys. My name's Josh Hansen. I'm a resident here in Kendall County, and I've watched some of this unfold over the last several years. I appreciate the councilwomen bringing up good questions tonight, Laura, Chelsea, I think. And one thing I just want to point out is I heard the city attorney mention that the principal planner is where this 30% rule officially came from, if I understood that correctly. And I would just point out that this principal planner, I think we could all agree, this UDC that you guys have been proposing and working on over the last, 6 years?
Been a while.
We're still fighting this. So I would say, should we look into other areas of that if she proposed those percentages? But not just that. Here, I pulled up the definition of village. It says a group of houses and associated buildings larger than a hamlet and smaller than a town situated in a rural area. And I think it's important that houses is mentioned prior to associated buildings. I think we can all agree here that we want a village, and mixed use obviously mentions that. The other thing here that I've got is, well, I had something else. And I lost my notes, but I think the challenge you asked, I think Mr. Minahan, you asked the challenge, what was it to him? I think the challenge for you guys would be to ask the P&Z to reflect and ask for input, have a town hall on this specific deal, bring in, I think Laura asked, the P&Z, did you guys ever ask anybody, developers whatsoever? Here's another comment for you guys. I heard Mr. Bilstein mention a specific 20-acre tract. If you guys take 70% of 20 acres, I believe that's over 600,000 foot of commercial space. Do you guys know anybody beating down doors renting 600,000 foot of commercial space lately? and we're talking setting it there for the next 50 years. I think the P&Z needs to think about what they're doing.
Yes, sir.
Sir Wes Pieper, Fair Oaks Ranch. A lot of tough acts to follow there. Just one thing that hit me is, oh, do I need to phrase this as a question? Have we sufficiently made sure we aren't cherry picking certain parts or certain phrases in the comprehensive plan? And one thing that hits me is that I do remember, I didn't look at the exact words, I don't have it in front of me, but there's something very specific in the comprehensive plan regarding residential housing, the need for and the desire for alternatives for people that currently live here, downsizing. Not everybody that lives in a 3,000, 4,000 square foot house, their husband dies, kids are all gone, and they'd like to stay in their community. There's specific reference to basically that in the comprehensive plan as a strong need in the city, because there is none of that, or there's so little of that. Well, you got the condos by the country club, and what is it, the gardens? There's almost none, and I'm sure, you know, there's a need there. It's in the comprehensive plan very specifically, and you know, the proposed development that really started this a year ago, the Botanica development that was proposed, I looked at that and I said, wow, that looks pretty cool. I didn't know if I could afford to live there because it was going to be upscale, and I live in the pauper part of the town, but it looked like a great alternative. I liked the aspect that it was going to be rental, you know. I don't want to own forever and have to be responsible for 100 oak trees and all that. Anyway, I thought it fit very well with the comprehensive plan very specifically, an alternative for people to downsize. And instead, it turned into, man, we don't want that. We don't want evil renters in this city. We don't want any of that. And you're doing everything you can to exclude something what I thought was a very viable alternative. I understand apartments, you want to do everything you can to stop apartments. I'm sorry, I used to live in an apartment when I lived in Omaha and St. Louis. I've repented for my sins. I'm no longer an apartment dweller, and I don't want to be one again, but if I have to, I will, because circumstances change. Have we looked at, to make sure we're not cherry picking and concentrating too much on one thing? We need those alternatives in this city. My wife knows people, older people, they're widows, they're widowers. They'd like to stay around here, but what alternative do they have? They have to leave town if they want to downsize. No, forget your watch pointing. Anyway, that's all I got to say. Have we looked at that?
Thanks,
Thank
Wes. Is there anybody else that had a comment or a question for tonight? So first of all, this is a workshop item. It's for discussion, and it's to provide feedback, really in this case, back to the P&Z on how to move forward. And so as we look at this, a lot of information, sir, you provide a lot of information also. Really what's trying to narrow down in what's the problem. So we're bringing something forward, a UDC item for change, and what is the problem? And for me, when I look at this, right now, we have a UDC in mixed-use village. We do have a definition of what it provides. As part of the stipulations of what it lays out, it says residential and commercial. And there is no limitation on either of what can go into mixed-use village. And so as part of residential, we have 4 components of residential. One of those is multifamily. So for me, the problem identifies is that the problem on the future land use map that is identified for mixed use could be built at this time 100% multifamily. And so my belief, and when I read the comprehensive plan and when I read the Unified Development Code and the statements that, from the surveys that we got, is that multifamily homes covering all of that property is not in line with what we want as part of the comprehensive plan or the UDC or the future desire of our residents of what they want to see the build out of Fair Oaks Ranch. It talks about rural, it talks about home sites, it does talk about walkability and commercial activities, which are things that we want, but I believe the problem boils down to is looking at, do we want to limit the amount of multifamily housing that can go into mixed-use village?
I think it could be looked at the other way. Do we also want to limit the number of commercial can go into it? I mean, it goes together, right? Again, both of them would have to, we think about what is the right percentage, but you could look at it both ways. And right now, the mixed-use village allows 100% commercial, 100% residential, and right now, we're just talking about limiting the amount of residential. We could be talking about limiting the amount of commercial. I'm not saying we do, but I'm just saying is why I think we were trying to solve a potential problem of someone coming in and putting in all apartments.
Right.
What if someone came in and put in a shopping mall, like in no apartments, because it is mixed use. So the question is, what do we want in that mixed use zone? Is there something, the way it's described, that will build something we didn't intend, or that we don't feel like the residents want to intend?
And I think that's a good point. In the perspective that I was looking at, not the limitation of all residential, just the one proponent, which
Right.
would be multifamily. Can I say something? You know, I don't. Or would you mind? So everybody at home gets to hear your comments too.
Yes.
I've recovered. So we don't like apartments any more than anybody here, okay? And I would just say that you don't want to, in a mixed use, I don't know what constitutes an apartment, but let's say you had a business, you know, I mean, if you go back, this, you know what's so funny is, you know, back in the 50s, 60s, everything used to be mixed use, even longer than that. And then we all came, you know, after World War II, everybody came to the city. But everybody, you know, everything used to be mixed use, right? Everything. You'd have a, cobbler and you live up top or whatever. You know, a lot of people, unless you were rural. So we just don't want to limit to, if you had a business, you know, you'd want some kind of apartment. You would call it what do you call it? I mean, typically they call it a business. I mean, we have some in Bernie where we have a business downstairs and the A word upstairs. I mean, I don't know what you call it. You can't call it a condo. So I would just say be careful on that language, because that's really, you know, if you had a shop, you'd want a living quarter up on top, whatever you would call that, but typically they call it an apartment.
So I guess first starting off with, do we see that in relation to this subject, do we as a council believe that there's a policy change that's needed? So let's not talk about the specifics of the policy change, just is there a policy change that's needed?
In terms of defining a percentage?
Just
You need to
in
change it at
overall.
all.
I mean, don't get into the specifics of it. Just looking at this and what's been presented, and the UDC currently lays out that it could be 100% residential or 100% commercial. And if given that, and it could be 100% multifamily with that, if we take that situation, do we look at it now and go, yes, we need to make a policy change to the UDC?
Great question, and I think if we look at the zoning map, let's look in practicality. Because each of those areas that are zoned with mixed use, for the most part, are pretty small, right? So even if it's 100% apartments, it's not that much.
Let's go to the future land use map.
Well, it's, the zoning map is probably more appropriate because that's what's actually zoned. They would have to change it So if you scroll in, the only area that is, yes, quite large, if you relative, is the area over there at Dietz Elkhorn and Fair Oaks Parkway. All the rest of them are inherently small places, areas, even the Minahan track, it's like just that slot right there, right? So based off of what is currently zoned, I think the only question is the one at the corner. Would it be better just to rezone the corner than change mixed use for everywhere?
So this current zoning that we have, and Scott, maybe this, you or Dan can help me out with this. We have future land use map. If a developer comes in and looks at a tract that's under the current existing zoning that we have, but future land use shows it as mixed use, as part of the development, are they looking at it as mixed use or the current zoning?
Current zoning.
Current zoning.
So what does the future land use map provide us as part of? Because we have all the properties along Old Fredericksburg Road that are shown as mixed use.
Yeah, so understand that the future land use map shows what the comprehensive plan has identified for that to be zoned in the future. So if it's not zoned that right now, if they come in and to develop with what it is currently zoned, they can develop it. They don't need to do anything. If it's currently zoned commercial, but the future land use plan says it should be something different than that, they can develop under what the current zoning is. That is only if you want to change your zoning. That is what the future land use plan says it should be changed to. But even that can be your comprehensive plan, your future land use maps are all can be amended, can be changed, can be reviewed and change over time.
Can I give an example, just so I make sure I understand? So on the Old Fredericksburg Road, on the left-hand side, right now, we have 3 flat lots that are zoned mixed use. They can come in and develop under mixed use right now.
That's right. They can pull a
Right.
permit and they
And then
can-
right
that's
above it, right north of it, that triangle one, that one is right now existing residential. There's homes there. If that property owner wants to get it rezoned to make it mixed use, they have the future land use map behind them.
That's correct.
Because they'll come before P&Z and say, hey, I'd like to change this to mixed use. And then we look at the future land use map and we said, well, we thought that would be a good place to have mixed use if we wanted it. And it should help with they would have evidence behind them to change that zone. Is that?
That's correct.
But they don't have to change it. They can keep it residential forever and ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
So, but they don't have to change it. They can keep it residential
Correct.
forever and
That's
ever.
correct.
And even if they decide to knock down their house and rebuild their house, we won't automatically zone them mixed use.
That's correct.
Okay. So really, we're looking at the zoning map. And potentially the future land use map, because if any one of those properties along Old Fredericksburg Road decide I want to become mixed use, it would fall under the same mixed use.
Well, so what would be most likely to happen in something like that? So let's say you purchased some of that property and you wanted to come in and you wanted to do something commercial. The staff would likely tell them the zoning calls for mixed use, and then their question is going to be, well, can I do what I want to do in mixed use? Right? And so if I want to do 100% commercial, but it's allowed in mixed use, I may not care if we zone it mixed use. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing is some of the rub is that if you arguably, yes, if you start putting mandatory percentages, then I might instead want to change that to a commercial zoning of some sort. But what I would have to do is first change the future land use map before I could get my commercial zoning, if that makes sense. So.
Right, because right now we're saying it should be mixed use, and if we limit the amount of whatever in mixed use, we would have to change it to commercial. We'd have to change the future land use map, then we would have to do the zoning, and then they would be able to do it.
Yeah, and
If they
I'm
request
looking here if you even have commercial, but.
So really what it boils down to, so that we do have then, based on that, we do have limited areas that are mixed use. One of the areas is the one that's right across the street over here. And at this time, so it is zoned mixed use?
Yes.
Currently, I think all the areas down by the Parkway are,
Zone mixed use.
well, they are zone mixed use, but I think, you know, you got CVS on one side, you got Frost Bank on the other side. There's limited land available down there, and I think that's the storage unit, the Shell station,
Shots.
and there's a restaurant going in down there on the corner of Pfeiffer and the access road. Point being is that there's not much land left down there that we could. So the concern really becomes, and back to the issue, is it something we need to address as part of our UDC? Do we want a policy change that provides limitation on multifamily relating to mixed use? Not the specifics on how we would do it. Is it something we want to get back to the P&Z and say we want to do this? My answer is, I believe, is yes. Well, I don't believe it. I believe that we need a limitation, not on residential, but on multifamily that could be built within the city.
I think it should be better defined, mixed use. I mean, I think we should direct P&Z to better define mixed use. I agree with that statement. I think, well, we're not talking, I guess, about this specific thing, but I think it's a little much and overreaching where it is.
Yeah, so I'm not, the first decision, do we need to address it? So what I heard is, yes, we need to give it back to P&Z. And we want, huh?
I said for me, I mean, I think that we need to better define mixed use.
Well, you're talking about the 30%, 70%?
Higher definition of mixed use, what it is, yes.
Right, is it can be used for a mix of uses or must be used for a mix of uses? That's where we're talking about. It can be used in mixed ways, or it must be used in mixed ways, and you have to have a house and a commercial in there. I think that's where we're running into problems, right?
And I agree with that, it needs to be.
Because right now, the mixed use down there on their Fair Oaks Parkway is not a mix of uses. It's CVS, it's Shots, it's Frost Bank. Same thing in,
You know, and the way, so if we're going to give it back to P&Z to, step one, define what mixed use is, then what is the guidance that we're giving them to look at? Do we want to put limitations on commercial and residential? I mean, that's kind of a step up of where we started off at today.
I have a question about that. So we were just talking about it. So if, let's pretend that CVS closes, right?
Yep.
And something else is gonna go in there, but it's zoned mixed use, so then they couldn't, in the current UDC, they could just rebuild another retail shop, whatever that would be. But if we limit it and keep it at mixed use, they couldn't put a restaurant or a shop or something there, or would it be grandfathered in? It wouldn't be, right? So in theory, we're limiting that as well.
I don't understand your
No,
question
I don't
because
think you're limiting that. The only thing that would be a limitation on what could be rebuilt is if there's a mandatory provision. Right now, there's not anything mandatory in the UDC that requires it to be mixed use. It's allowed. And what your percentages are doing aren't mandatory either, other than to residential. And what I'm hearing the mayor say is we would rather that limitation be solely directed at multifamily. And so, you know, when you talk about having the P&Z better define mixed use village is in these charts that you have in your packet. Anything that is a P is permitted. So I don't think you really need them to redefine what is allowed in mixed use village unless you want to remove things from that permitted use chart, which certainly you can give them direction on what you want removed from the permitted use chart. Or if you just want them not to, if you don't want mixed use village to have a mandatory mix of uses, then that's the expression they need to hear from the council, that you don't want it to have a requirement.
I think that's a really key point, Dan, is the definition of mixed use is that table, not just random words that were in there. Because what I was hearing is when we've had developers come in and present something that is congruent with the chart. The pushback is, the words say it should be a mix of uses, but the actual chart allowed it.
Right, that, because, yeah, I think, and there was some discussion from some former folks, yes, that the intent, it got into the intent of mixed use. What is the intent? And that's a valid discussion, but that's not what it says. It doesn't have that mandatory provision. So, yes, globally, when you look at planning principles, that's the intent of mixed use, but that doesn't mean that's the intent here. If the intent here is simply to allow those options because you have limited tracks available for commercial, and and that was the other part of that discussion that we had, is that do we let the market dictate that or not? And what I hear from Mr. Minahan is, yeah, you let the market dictate what's best to develop on that property. If it's commercial, it's commercial. If it's residential, or if it's both, right? And so if that's the prevailing opinion of the council, there's really nothing that has to be done to the existing language, and you could let it go until you do update your comprehensive plan, and you do have those town halls, and you do see if there's any changes that need to be made through that process. I mean, those are the options.
So, I'm not sure I fully understood your question, because it is a mixture of uses right now. Bottom line, I think there's no limitation on it.
No, I know what it is now.
Uh-huh.
Right, and I think my question didn't relate to the table. The table clearly shows it's a mixture of uses. You can do whatever use you want, no limitations.
Right.
The table says that. But
Right.
what I've heard from P&Z members, and of course, please correct me if I get this wrong, was that there was also wording describing what mixed use was outside of the table that said is intended to be a mix of uses. So there was confusion between the table and the wording that described what mixed use was. And so either we change the wording to match the table, or we change the table to match the wording, but there was a confusion there. And I don't like confusion, so I'd like it to match.
There is a definition of mixed-use village in Chapter 4, which is
Yeah.
the zoning chapter. And I won't read the whole thing, but it references pedestrian scale development, major nodes, near arterials, yada, yada. And the last sentence in that paragraph says, uses within this zoning district include commercial, office, retail, and restaurant, with a variety of residential uses permitted.
Okay. So then,
I still think if there's the ability to put 100% apartment complex, that's a loophole.
Yep.
Otherwise, it would have been zoned strictly multifamily, originally as intended.
great.
So, just kind of backing up a little bit. So right now, my belief, we are in a position that multi-use village, it can be any combination of 100% commercial to 100% residential.
Right now, yes.
Right, and I have no problem with that. And the only concern I have is that when you look at the 4 areas of residential, one of those areas is multifamily. So if you translate that, it could be 100% commercial or 100% multifamily. Could be. Right, I mean, that, worst case, yes, sir. If I'm not stating it correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we all agree.
Yeah. Again, I'm, I wouldn't call it a loophole, Ruben. That's how they wrote it. But I do agree with you, and that's what it says. Words matter, and so why don't we look at limiting that aspect? As I said, I mean, I think probably by law you have to have some place. I think Attorney Dan can address it. You have to have something. So why don't we put some kind of limitation on it? I mean, I own the property and I don't care. So, but I think, if you go in there and you say, hey, you can't do that, I think you do run into potential.
And that's really the whole discussion tonight is multifamily. Do we want to put a limitation on it?
Right, but the proposal that also included single residential and accessory building residential units,
Well, so
which is above garages and above building units.
Well,
apparently.
so what the P&Z has recommended to us is a 30% limit on residential.
All categories.
So what I was trying to get to, first of all, is we're looking at family housing. Do we want to make a change to the UDC related to multifamily housing? It's kind of a nod up or down, yes or no, we want to do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we intended to have those areas to be 100% multifamily
Right, so with
homes.
that,
Okay.
then we need to provide guidance back to P&Z on how to move forward with this. And so what I hear is really, we want to put a restriction on multifamily housing only.
What about the single-family residential attached townhomes? Well, there are two different categories in our table. And so,
So consider it also.
okay, that's what I'm just asking, is
Uh-huh.
do we lump that together, like townhomes and apartments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's multifamily, but yes.
Duplexes.
I understand.
But they also put garden homes or patio homes in there, so I don't know, we have a lot of patio homes. So.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm sitting here listening to this and thinking to myself is that we have this percentage is not well supported, so that's one thing. We got to give them back another direction. So it was a good attempt, a good try, but we have so little tracts of land left for this. I'm not even sure we need to address this problem. I mean, I might be the only one on the council differing from the council, but with the small number of available properties that we've defined and zoned as such, and when you look at it as a percentage of the whole city, I'm not sure we have a problem that needs to be addressed. Now, again, I might be the lone wolf out here, but it seems to me that we should be careful that we don't run afoul of making some kind of arbitrary, what is the basis other than we want to limit. I think we have to have a basis for limitation, not just we don't like it. And going back to the comprehensive plan, if I haven't seen it in a while, but that 50%, that's a pivotal point. It wasn't like 80% of the residents wanted this and 20 didn't. It was 50.4, whatever it was. So I'm
Depends
not
on
sure.
how the question was asked, and
Yeah.
I really want to make sure we're not misinterpreting how the question was
Right.
asked, okay?
And I'm not sure I see that we have a problem to limit it. But again, I'm open to discussion, so just bring that up.
At one point, we had a discussion, I can't even remember when, and
We just
I
need to narrow it down.
remember it being told, the way I heard it essentially, was that we can't limit only multifamily housing. Can you elaborate on that?
So there's, I think that got misinterpreted just a little bit. I mean, so there's, there are risks if you zone out the possibility of having multifamily housing in your community. But it's not something that's automatic, right? You could be challenged on something like that. But I think the other option that you have that I don't think could be questioned is limiting the percentage of mixed use that can be multifamily. The other thing that, and again, it's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but what that looks like is consistently changing and often changing. And you could have somebody come in here that does want to build one of these single-family residential attached developments, but they're individually owned or they're on individual lots. I mean, it's so often it's an ownership, it's how those are done on the ownership side and how those are deeded and how those are subdivided versus what they look like or something like that. And so the products are changing, what is being built in these surrounding communities, and some of those might be more palatable than others. And so it's really, when we say multifamily residential, there's a lot of things that people might think fall into that, but often it is how that is subdivided and put on paper.
Are you familiar with like the Birdsong development in Leon Springs?
Yes.
Is that, would that be multifamily or would that be a single residential, attached?
Mhm.
Okay.
Possible, yeah.
It's basically,
It's above a daycare.
there's a, there's a large area in Leon Springs. It was basically the residents use the park, and there's single family that kind of surround it. And I guess they don't look like apartments, but it's basically individual units
Yes.
covering the entire area.
Yeah, there's a lot of those
So it's,
being
well,
built now.
Townhomes.
townhomes, yeah. It's, yeah. So there's, I guess what, Dan, you're saying there's ways around it.
Well, I'm just saying, yeah, well, I'm also saying there's not everything that's quote multifamily or that ends up being rented is a 3-story, traditional apartment complex. The products have evolved quite a bit. And you could also have, condos, and condo regimes, which are individually owned as well, but you can put a lot of units in there. And so there's two separate discussions. There's a density discussion, and there's the multifamily discussion. And so I really think that maybe that's the focus when we're concerned about, well, we're going to get in trouble if we limit multifamily. It's like, well, what is it about multifamily? Is it that they're rentals, or is it that is it really about density? So if it's about density, then that has nothing to necessarily do with multifamily, because there's way to still have multifamily, right?
At the
Depending on the
LEUs or
density.
whatever, could we limit density?
So it depends. So a lot of these property owners, they hold LUEs. So I mean, they have a right to develop, right, at a certain density based on how many LUEs they hold. And I don't know what they are. I'm not going to pretend to. I don't have them all memorized out here, but you have many properties here who are guaranteed a certain number of LUEs, and Carol probably knows better than I where those are. And so that's what controls the density on those tracks. Other than that, the density is controlled by the zoning classification.
Have density control on the mixed use?
So in the prior iteration of the mixed-use development that was coming in there, the only limitation was how many LUEs were held by that property. And so the density that you saw before on Mr. Minahan's property was fine with regard to the LUEs. The issues that were run into had nothing to do with the density with regard to LUEs. It had to do with other factors.
Got it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so, first off, I just want to state, I hope you appreciate how important these topics are to us, because, I have a wife at home putting kids to bed. I could speak the same for Natalie. We're here for a reason. And Mr. Roden, to your point of not having an issue to act on, we do, because that purple track is our front yard. And I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. I'm a restaurateur. Fair Oaks Ranch is what I would call a target-rich environment. Oh, man, salivating. Get me in there. It's get me in there. Just as someone that doesn't live here, holy cow, let me open a wine bar. Let me do something. Just let me do something. And part of that is this strip mall across the street. That being said, I'm also a restaurateur that knows I'm not going to build a restaurant without significant captive audience above me or around me, which comes into mixed use, right? Mixed use for a restaurateur is what we look for, because if we're going into single-family houses, we're building a different restaurant, or we're not building a restaurant at all, to your point earlier. I have no interest in a lease in a suburb with single-family houses. I urge you to be careful how we develop, because we're out here for a reason. And we've seen it in Bernie, and we've seen it in other places. And quite frankly, you guys are in a difficult position, because this is a crossroads in cities. And I will speak strictly from a restaurant perspective. Chicago, there's more Michelin star restaurants, which is our grading system, opening up outside of city limits because they're rent restricted. They can't open in downtown. Jersey City is the #1 place where people are opening restaurants in New York City because they can't open restaurants in downtown. Dripping Springs in Austin, I would call a similar community in distance to us, where restaurants are opening. Plano, Richardson, we're that place, whether we like it or not. As an operator, I love it. As a resident, maybe not. But I urge you to reconsider these restrictions, because having fought those battles with other cities, it feels like they are a little more buttoned up on those restrictions than we are currently. And I'm telling you, the bullseye is on us. Restaurateurs want us. Period. End of statement. Bernie doesn't have a million miles of Main Street. They're gonna come for here. And I urge you, before we come, I come, they come, that we need to button up these restrictions because we need a proper plan in place to develop the right way.
When
Yes,
you say the proper restrictions in place, what is it that you're looking at?
So
Specific?
case studies.
Multifamily?
Case studies for me in the past. I will look for certain developments where, like, multifamily, again, it's market driven, as we've talked about, right? I mean, it's, if someone comes in and says, I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna put townhomes, it's the market, right? I think for this community in particular, you know, it's unlike any community I've lived in. I'm from Chicago, like, I'm a big city guy. Yeah. So part of what makes this and Bernie attractive is I can put a mom and pop restaurant, which we've talked about. Like, we don't want a Chili's, all due respect to Chili's, but like, I want a chef that's, you know, taking a risk and building a restaurant. But that chef's gonna want certain assurances of, like, are there apartments above me? Can someone walk to my restaurant? That's what that chef is looking for. In Bernie, it exists because there's Main Street, it's a tourist draw. Eventually, it's gonna expand beyond that, where we're in a Dripping Springs type situation where everyone's moving out here. I can put a restaurant there.
Okay.
And I know that's not a super clear answer, but that ability to walk to your restaurant is key. So I don't want to, as a resident, I'm like, I don't want a million apartment homes. But as a steward of the city moving forward, it's something to consider because, you know, we want to be really thoughtful with how we parcel out this land.
Well, some of what you talk about is in our comprehensive plan. It
Sure,
does talk-
and forgive me for not being super knowledgeable about that. Yeah.
It does talk about walkability and having those shops. And just getting back to really the point of what we were trying to address tonight is, I just think the problem is that we don't have a limitation on what multifamily can be built as part of mixed use. And right now, with the mixed-use properties that are available, a developer could buy that property, submit a plat, and build it 100% multifamily. Right. And so I believe that's a concern because it's not in the nature of what is written in the comprehensive plan of what we want as the future of Fair Oaks Ranch. And it's not, I don't believe it's the desire of the residents of Fair Oaks Ranch.
We moved out here for I mean.
My concern is if, if there was another Napa Oaks that was going in somewhere in the city, that we'd have a lot of people with some concerns about what the city council's doing. And how do we allow something like this to happen? And so that's what's really driven the concern with this. And so really comes, Dan, I don't think we were trying to fully limit out multifamily. I think all we were trying to do is, we know that we have spots that multifamily can occur within the city, and do we want to limit that amount so that it's not 100% of the property?
Dan, can I ask you a question? So in the future land use map, the large area off Old Fred Road, which I think kind of borders Front Gate, or it's on to the west of Front Gate, the purple.
Behind it, yeah.
Yeah.
Can she point to it?
The triangle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes. So that is not currently zoned mixed use.
Correct.
It's existing residential.
Correct. So today, can a developer buy that land that's currently zoned residential and it's, right up against Front Gate? Can they buy that and submit a plan to build 100% apartments or high-density housing apartment complexes in that property?
As soon as they zone it mixed use, they could, yes.
Okay.
But because it's on our future land use map already as mixed use.
That's correct.
Then that kind of paves the way for it for the rezoning.
I got my own pointer, so there we go, yeah, right there.
Can I just make a couple comments as well? So I just want to point out that although it's on the future land use map, it's obviously not guaranteed. If a developer were to come in, Ruben, to your point, and ask to develop that track at 100%, we've already seen a developer come in on a track right across the street and ask for nearly 100% multifamily development. Number one, they're restricted on LUEs, I think is what the city attorney mentioned. So that's in place already. Those tracks are already restricted on the density based on the LUEs. So I think that's an important point that we note, that whether it's 30% or 70% or 888%, they're already limited on the number of homes that can be built there. So to Keith's point, do we actually have an issue, or these tracks are already vested with the LUEs that they're gonna have or they're not gonna have? To that point as well, those tracks already have LUEs that would serve residential and commercial, not or, it's and. So they're already limited on what can total number of LUEs be done on those properties. I think that's an important point to note, because right now somebody can't come in and say, I want 5 million homes and get density to do that. They cannot do that. So we're having a discussion here about limiting these multifamily homes, top to bottom, whatever it is. They're already vested with LUEs. And we've already seen the process that a developer came in with, I think as Mr. Piper mentioned, a beautiful plan to potentially help an elderly family move into, that type of community, and the pushback they received already. So it's not like, I think there's a lot of comments here that, oh, you can come in and get rezoned. It's not quite that easy. And I think there's a lot of thought in the room maybe that, oh, if someone wants to come do that because it's on the Flume map, they can, and it's not the case.
And to kind of go along with that in our discussion, we keep saying things like, oh, somebody could put another Napa Oaks there. But in reality, nobody can come in and put a Napa Oaks apartment with our current zoning over there. So I want to make that clear
And I
when
think if
we
you
make
guys- will
these
you pull up-
statements that it's limited, like he's saying, to a specific number, and nothing as big as that can go over there.
And I think I made this point at previous meetings, and I guess I forgot to make it again, is we have so many other restrictions on these lots as well. Like, you must have this much setback, you must have this many parking lots, you must have this many trees, you must have this many shrubs, spaces between shrubs. I promised I wouldn't bring that up, but I am. And, there's so many other restrictions that not every single inch of that property can even have construction on, because we have all these other things, and no one's ever come back and said, okay, with all the other requirements put on it, really only 50% of that lot can be built on. So divide that acreage in half, and then within that, how much can you really put on that, right?
And Laura, I'll just make one more comment. If you guys will pull up the actual current zoning map, and then if you'll zoom into this track that everybody seems to be talking about, the one off of Detail Corn, I think maybe the biggest note to mention is the southwest or southeast quarter of that whole track is the military base. There is never going to be any development that could potentially support any of this commercial activity.
That piece that you were talking about is,
Right there next to the Army base.
oh, right there.
Like right here.
Okay.
And so there's a whole quadrant that is never going to be able to support any of the commercial activity everybody's proposing. And I think that's hugely important to the restaurateur over here. If he wants to come in and support our community, I think we need to do something to support him. Having a walking distance neighborhood is probably top of the list.
All right. Yes, sir. I'm trying to wind this up so we can get to a point. No. I'm just
It
trying to
wasn't
wind
you.
it up. Nothing to do with you personally.
This time.
Sir Pieper, I'm back. Can we go to the table 4.2, and getting back on where are the old geezers going to go when they want to downsize? What it says in the comprehensive plan, which I think makes total sense. And I promise I'll do my best to not revert to my evil apartment dweller days. But there's two different categories. There's a multifamily residential, which I assume is basically apartments. But then we've got the one above it, single-family residential attached / townhome / patio home / duplex / multi-unit homes, 3 to 4 units. Let's be careful to make a distinction between the two. I assumed that the supposedly evil Botanica development fell into the the bigger category, the single-family residential, et cetera. I assume that wasn't multifamily residential, but maybe I'm wrong. But let's get that clear. Where else are the old geezers gonna go? And if we combine that with the limited number of properties that you guys just talked about, we're not talking about a lot. Look at the categories or the zoning districts that those single-family residential, et cetera, can go in. In addition to mixed-use village, neighborhood commercial, there's almost none of that. And they're small or not even existing today. Community facilities, well, we're not gonna build, how are they gonna build multifamily anything on what's already a church or the city campus? Basically, be careful to restrict what those alternatives might be for the old geezers that want to downsize accidentally just because you're trying to keep out the evil apartments. That would be my point. Let's think it through, a combination of what are the definitions, what fits in there, and what land are we actually talking about, whether it's currently zoned that or potential in the future, and be realistic. Because all the other land, which the vast majority of it is zoned rural residential or neighborhood residential, it doesn't apply. So it gets to your, are we making a big deal out of something where it isn't even an issue, or it shouldn't be? A mountain out of a molehill, it seems to me like, and I think it has been from the start. I don't think there was a problem personally. I didn't see the problem with Botanica or anything like that. I appreciate the comments about the commercial. Because let's face it, they're only going to build commercial here if it makes sense for them financially. That's kind of logic. So, and let the market take care of business to the extent it can. It will. It has in the past.
Thanks, Wes. All right, so the first concern is this a policy issue that we want to refer back to the, I guess that we want to move forward with? So we're looking at a limitation on multifamily related to, and maybe it could be extended multifamily and the category right above it, single-family residential attached. But bottom line is, looking at this, is this something we define as a problem that we want to make a policy change to the UDC on? Not the specifics on how to do it, just is this something that we think is a problem that we need to make a change? Anybody?
I'll say no.
So you're okay if we leave it as it is and somebody were to come in at a future time and put 100% multifamily in?
The other restrictions that we have, I just feel like encompassed it, so I'm fine. I struggle with this, but I say leave it.
I'm not struggling. I think we need to address it.
I personally think we need to address it. I think we need a limitation on it and however it works. Something specific that outlines a limitation on multifamily that can be built, reference a development.
I agree, and whether also you look at if the category just above it is too broad, because that's a wide swath of different homes, and whether that can be further defined or separated or whatever, but I think it is a problem that needs to be addressed.
I mean, I'm with Chesley. I don't know that we need to address it, but if we do, we better have a solid basis for what limitation we use, because what's been presented it's a tough call. How do you get to the number and the percent? So I think we're gonna have to direct the PNC to go back to they're going to provide a reason behind it that is supportable, not just this is what we found in Bernie or Kerrville or Comfort. You know, I think it's going to have to be very well thought out. But at the moment, I mean, I'm not seeing that we have enough property to worry about limiting that. But I'm just part of the council, so that's my opinion.
So you're saying no problem now?
I don't see a problem at the moment. I mean, unless I'm
So
missing
you're saying
something.
we don't need to address this.
I feel like it's already okay the way it is in the, UDC, but we'll go with the wishes of the council.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the wishes of the
Okay,
council are right now.
I say
so-
we're okay.
Okay.
For the moment.
I think I'm willing to address the multifamily residential. I think if it just was out of the blue and nothing happened to make us look at this, there's nothing that would have driven me to. But I do appreciate the P and Z noticing, hey, someone can come in here and make it all one or the other. Even though that wasn't the proposal that Botanica came, but they just acknowledged that, hey, that is a possibility. I'm open to see a proposal. How about I say that? I'm open to see a proposal and the reason behind it. And I agree with Ruben. I think there's some value in townhome, garden home type of scenarios that may not need to be limited. We have lots of neighborhoods that are 100% garden homes, and they're well needed and used in Fair Oaks Ranch.
So what are the things that we should look at? So we need to get some guidance back to, so we're going to pass this back to P&Z, and we're saying, yes, we want to do a policy change related to multifamily. So what are the specific things? We've talked about LUEs as tied to each of the properties. It's probably something that currently we ought to take a look at, and what are those numbers that have currently been identified for existing residential, identified for future mixed use, or currently mixed use areas that we have identified by zoning.
Fine, LUEs do not apply to every property in the city. We do have properties that are not on our utility, so that is not a restriction we can apply.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we're asking, in developing a justification, what are the things that should be considered as part of determining what that percentage should be?
Well, and I'm with.
LUEs can be used as a tool, development tool, if you will, but my recommendation would be not to, as it relates to your UDC, to not rely upon LUEs for that, for your policy decision.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get to are what are all the areas that we should consider, refer back to the P&Z, consider all these areas and identifying a percentage. So it wouldn't be just that one.
I'm with you. We have limited number of properties. It's not like we're asking them to look at 5,000 areas of the city. We have like 6 lots. I mean, let's just pull. What are the LOUs? What are the deed restrictions? What are the specifics of the ones that we have zone mixed use? And let's look at what other restrictions we have for building in there and look at those very, very specific areas, because I don't think any of us are talking about adding new areas of mixed use at this time. So it's not like it's a whole long list. We have like 6 of them.
Are you referring to present and future?
Yes.
Okay.
Present and the future land use map, because those could come in, right? And what is the worst case scenario? If I bought this lot, what are the LUEs? If I add all of the trees and the shrubs and the parking lot and the setbacks and the whatever, and the green belt that we require, whatever we require, which we require a lot, how much is left? I think the specifics matter in this case. If we were a much bigger city, that would be way too much and that would be outrageous. But we have, 6 areas? I mean.
So as part of this, and so we talked about LUEs, I think what Laura brought up, good point, is going through the UDC and what are all the other requirements that we currently have related to the UDC that would impact a multifamily, which then ultimately would determine the size of the multifamily dwelling that could be put on a property. And maybe there's a percentage related to that when it's tied to the parking lot and tied to setbacks, landscape, I mean, all the requirements that we put in the UDC.
We may limit it already by all the other
Yeah,
requirements
it may
we
already
have
be
on
limited
there.
to 20%. So,
Right.
and any other things that, and I think overall, it's just, I think what I heard the concern is we need something that provides a supported justification on the percentage that is being recommended.
And I'm willing to look at that.
Okay?
That was fun. What's next?
Scott, do you think that,
Have we provided enough to move forward with this?
Garbage is next.
I don't know if I can give you a good answer on that, to be honest with you right
Okay.
now, but we're hearing the LUAs, we got setbacks, we'll have to take a look at it. As far as percentages go, I mean, those do vary by different cities. I think, in reference to, I think Councilmember Kerner mentioned sometimes it's the opposite mix, and I think our P&Z chair at some point, some areas of San Antonio, they require 70% to be residential, the exact opposite. So it still is a relatively arbitrary line in the sand, if you will. So I think you're going to get back to that point regardless when this does come back. But we can certainly look at
And I think we've had
setbacks
some
and
residents
where
that
they
have-
apply.
that have stood up and offered their assistance in probably helping making this determination. They may have some expertise or something that could be provided, so. Let's move on. Everybody okay with that? All right, let's move on to the last workshop item that we have tonight. The request for proposals for municipal solid waste collection. Clayton.
All right, good evening. I'm Clayton Holster, Procurement Manager with the Finance Department. So just a little bit of background. In 2017, the franchise agreement with Republic Services was executed. It was for a 5-year term. So in 2022, a 2-year renewal was executed that expires at the end of September of this year. At the previous City Council meeting, some different options were presented. Republic was here to present their proposal for renewing the existing franchise agreement. So we went over a few different options. We presented to you to exercise the option to renew the current agreement, to either solicit proposals for a new agreement or to negotiate a new agreement with a specific service provider. And the direction we received was to go seek proposals for a new solid waste collection services contract. So that is what we're here to do tonight. Typically, we don't bring our request for proposals forward. We just know that this is a really important project that'll directly impact citizens, and we really want your feedback on this to make sure we are capturing everything you want and we meet all the service expectations for you. So a lot of what we have in the request for proposals is similar to what we issued last time. We will be asking for a detailed cost for everything that's included in the proposal to see how these monthly costs are built and what each particular service item makes up. So we'll be asking for the residential rate inclusive of all the solid waste services, recycling, garbage, the screenings, recycled materials. We'll be asking for a cost inclusive of a biannual brush and bulky item pickup. We'll also ask for the total monthly residential rate inclusive of an annual collection for the household hazards. And then one thing that's going to be different in here is we're also going to be asking for a proposed cubic yard price for any special or storm-related residential-owned property brush and bulky pickup items. So that's not a requirement that the bidders do this. This just helps us establish a cubic yard price, which the cubic yard methodology is what we did last year when we had our ice storm for the pickup in order to establish a cost. So the intention of that is basically whoever we contract with, if we wanted to, we would already have a negotiated rate up front, and let's say some sort of unexpected disaster happens, we know what they'll charge per cubic yard, and we can just pick up the phone and call if we wanted to. Kind of iron that out up front. So we are really just seeking your feedback tonight. After tonight, we will incorporate anything that you ask, and then the next step will basically be us just advertising the request for proposals, getting those proposals, doing a thorough evaluation, and then bringing a proposed recommendation back to you at a future city council date. So with that, I am happy to answer any sort of questions you have.
Clayton, what I think you're looking for tonight, you've laid out a proposal that's in here that has
Correct.
the information. And this is what we're going to submit for RFQ or
Yeah.
RFP, whatever
Correct.
the process is. So what I believe you're looking for guidance back from us, are these the right areas?
Correct.
So in short, we're asking for the, the same services and the same frequencies that we offer now. And we're asking for bidders to bid on the first 3 in totality with an optional 4th item. So the question before council is and the question/suggestion, if there are any changes to those services that you want to consider, now would be the time.
Right.
I just had one question. Do we still need the wastewater sludge pickup? I thought we got that cool dewatering thing.
The dewatering, from my understanding, is for a different sort of sludge pickup. This is for the solid screenings for everything coming in. Am I speaking correctly, Stephen? Yes. So it's a different, the
Okay.
dewatering press doesn't capture this cost that we're
Much
asking
less
for.
frequently than we have in the past, but it is still a need.
We still have a haul off.
Oh, because we got
from
to
the
throw the pucks.
solids.
We throw the whatever they are.
Solids.
The puck of solids into this thing. Okay, got it.
And so that's hauled off, yep. Yes, sir.
Could we have, I mean, I read it, but I may have missed it. Could we have something for them to respond on how quickly they'll deal with missed pickups? Because I think in the past, there were some issues, I know I experienced them, where it took them days to come back. So have them put in here how they will handle that as part of your RFP. Just let them answer that so we can assess it.
Yes, I'm just thinking, well, here, we usually address that in the contract, or we should, but if we want to specify a specific turnaround time, something we could list in the RFP.
You can, usually that's something that we negotiate, so we
that's
can
fine.
get input from because we can get our input from once you have selected someone, that's a separate discussion we can have with the council with regard to any specific contract items that you want negotiated in there. That's very detailed to put as something that you want them to respond to specifically in the RFP.
And that's fine. You know, I know if you ask for certain things in your proposal, they're going to price it based on the services you're asking. So if we're asking them to have a hot shot truck available for same day or next day, that might affect their pricing. That was the only reason I mentioned it, but I'm fine waiting until the contract. If you guys, whatever you guys, it's one concern I have when we get down to whoever we pick.
Quick question. Looking at the containers, and I know we have the ability, and this may be a contract thing, to pay extra to have a second garbage. So on 9.21, it says 1 container for each, which will be obviously paid in the monthly cost. Are we still going to have that option? Because I know a lot of people out by me use that option.
I've a similar approach. I believe it would be. I mean, all the providers I'm familiar with do that. I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah, what we'll be asking for in this request for proposals really is just our baseline for making a selection, seeing their structure. We'll ask them for a list of all their equipment, whether it's owned or leased, to provide that supporting documentation that they can do the job for us. So it'll all be kind of part of the evaluation process, make a selection, and then go into those real detailed negotiations.
Attorney just pointed out to me that it is in there, so never mind.
Anybody else? All right. Unless you need anything else, I think we can move on.
Yeah, we'll move forward with moving this. We'll keep it moving forward, and you'll see us back here again later
Next
date.
week?
What's that?
Next week?
Not next week, but at a later date.
All right. Thanks, Clayton. And we have one report from staff tonight, and Joanna's going to give us an update on the new website redesign.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So tonight what is up on the screen right now is previewing what our new city website is going to look like. So really what our purpose behind this intention was more user experience, ease of use, prioritizing and streamlining information based off of the data and analytics that we've received from how our residents are actually utilizing our current website. So as you can see, it does look a little bit different. We tried to stay in line with the Hill Country view. We do, and I'm gonna try and scroll down here, have these quick ease touch buttons to hopefully, what we expect to see is that our residents and users will be able to navigate to the things that they want a little bit easier, a little bit more recognizable. And then as we scroll down, we'll have features to be able to feature our news flashes, items like that. We'll have lists here that we can include graphics in as well. And then our calendars, meeting events, things like that. As far as the dive down in these buttons, of course, they're not active yet, but they're basically going to come over the same way as they are now. And as we go through this, staff will systematically go through each of these to clean pages up, to reorganize, to change the sitemap based on the data that we get from how the site is being used continually. But we just wanted to give kind of a quick preview of what we're looking at, some of the changes that were made. But does council have any questions for me tonight? Fantastic. We hope to go live with the new website tentatively right now by the end of May. So if anything changes, we will definitely update on that. But here we go. All right, thank you.
With that, we'll move on to our requests and announcements. Council members, any announcements? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to acknowledge our state representative, Mark DeRazio, is in the audience, and he represents our area, so thank you for coming, Mark.
Anybody else? I have one announcement. We have an upcoming election on May 4th. We'll have for the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, early voting will be available from Monday, April 22nd, which is next week. And early voting will run through April 30th, which is Tuesday of the following week, and minus the polls being closed on Sunday, April 28th. All residents of Fair Oaks Ranch will be able to vote at City Hall right here in this room in the Public Safety Training Room. No matter what county you live in, if you're a Fair Oaks Ranch resident, you can vote here. For Fair Oaks Ranch, we have two measures on the ballot. Both measures involve city roads that we drive on every day. First is the reauthorization of a sales tax fund to be dedicated to street maintenance and repair. It's something that we've had in the works, or we've had approved for multiple, 2008 until now. Second measure on the ballot is for residents to decide if they want to authorize the city to execute general obligation bonds up to an amount not to exceed $16 million. That's two issues that we, especially the bond that we're giving, that we want the residents to make a decision on. Is that the way we want to move forward? And so I'm putting it out tonight so that we want to get people to come out and vote. In addition to the two measures being proposed by the city for the election on May 4th, Bernie ISD has an election for its school board members at the same time. For those residents of Fair Oaks Ranch who live within the BISD boundaries, you'll also be able to vote at the same time at this location for the BISD members at the same time you vote on the two measures from the city. So the takeaway, early voting begins on April 22nd. Election day is May 4th, and all residents from Fair Oaks Ranch can vote right here in the Public Safety and Training Room at City Hall. Scott, anything else?
Nothing unless you have questions for me.
Does any council member have anything that they'd like to add to a future council agenda? Sure. All right. Well, I don't think we had a need for executive session tonight. If y'all'd like to, we could. Okay. Amanda, anything that we missed or anything else that we need to cover for tonight? All right, Scott, anything from your perspective or?
Sir.
All right, I have the time now is 9:14 and we are adjourned. Sir Wes, holy smokes. It was a good discussion, but it was,
To be hot flashed out, like, it really, really did.
I was kind of concerned about residents, giving technical advice. But, and I still don't understand why Mr. Minahan was all upset.